Good afternoon, and welcome to our final day of Coverings Connected. In this afternoon's webinar, Acting on the NTCA Culture Survey, Leadership in the Face of COVID-19. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items. This program is AIA and IDCEC accredited for one CEU. Please check the chat screen for contact information on how to request your CEU. All attendees are in listen-only mode. You can submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions section of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will share with the presenter, getting to as many as time allows. If you are having problems connecting or any other issue, often closing the window and starting a new window will fix the problem. If you're having problems with your computer audio, call the number on your invitation to listen via your phone. The audio pin for this session is 118# or hashtag, depending on your generation. The session will be recorded, made available on the Coverings site after Coverings Connected. Don't miss all the other great Coverings Connected opportunities available through coverings.com today. I would now like to introduce our presenter. Wally Adamchik is the president of Firestarter Speaking and Consulting, a Raleigh, North Carolina-based construction leadership, consulting, and training company. Take it away, Wally.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just remember the AIA and the CEUs that were just covered. They're here for you. Not going to spend a lot of time in that. Not going to get you're here. You've decided to be here. You know what the goals of the session are. Thanks for being here. Just one more thing on the virtual housekeeping, as was just mentioned. We're going to go for 55 minutes or so. I'm not going to take any breaks, but if you do, we won't know. So, do what you got to do. But it's one-way audio, and the most important thing here is use the Q&A function to submit questions. Don't wait till the end. The moderators are on board, and they'll chime in and go, hey, I got a question. So let's address them along the way. And of course, for those, if you don't get that question in now, or for those of you who are watching this sometime later on the recording, don't hesitate to send me an email, wally@firestarter.com. Obviously, it's associated with this presentation, and happy to get into that conversation. What we do here in education is great, but we need to move, as always, whenever we tend to a show or education or whatever, we want to move from education to application. How do we take it out into the real world and use it? And I'm here for you from that perspective. So this is the flow we're going to go through. I'm going to talk to you about this survey that we just did and a little bit of background on it as we go through it as well. So the fact that none of you have a hangover right now, nobody has any powdered sugar, on their collar from going the Cafe du Monde. I mean, let's put it this way. There's no place I'd rather be than in New Orleans with y'all. But if I can't be there, this is where I want to be. But the fact that we are not there obviously confirms that these are crazy times. We all know that. But it would be inappropriate and pretty stupid to get into a labor quality conversation and not acknowledge what's going on right now. So, the objective of this presentation is not to talk about right now, but a lot of the data comes from before right now. So we're trying to parse through that. And that is the elephant in the room, right? I mean, who knows what's coming next? And anybody who says they know is lying, because this has never happened before. We've gotten to near an unemployment level that it took 3 years in the Great Depression. We've done it in about 6 weeks. So, nobody knows. So that's clearly the elephant in the room. But here's what we do know. We got to buckle up. The AIA bookings index came out yesterday, and as you can see, demand for the design services, its largest ever monthly decrease in March. Can April be worse? I don't know. AGC yesterday, 59% of the respondents have problems with project delays and disruptions compared to 45% last week. Now, the interesting thing here at the next one, the common source of delays or disruptions is shortages of material, parts, equipment, including PPE. Now, the shortages of material is an interesting one as we talk to tile folks, because a lot of your product does come from overseas. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Obviously, NTCA is going to, help you more on that than I possibly could, but it's definitely something we need to think about. This next one is fascinating. 28% of firms responding on the AGC survey yesterday, or for last week, said they've got shortages of craft workers. And what that underscores is that there is an anxiety out there. There is a concern about employee safety that continues to be an issue and will be an issue for you going forward. So as we go forward, you think about, business before coronavirus COVID, it was great. We were, the charts were looking like that. Maybe the picture on the after there is a little dramatic, but we really don't know, and I think we need to be prepared for the worst, and I'll talk about that in a second. Now, we flip that to the labor side, and what did labor look like before? Well, labor before was pretty rough, and the assumption a lot of people are making now is that in a downturn, and I think it's safe to say that we'll be in some kind of a downturn, that labor will be more plentiful. Perhaps. If you remember the last downturn, a lot of people left the industry. So this is some
Wally, your sound's going in and
is a
out.
little. So as we go to first recognize, and I noticed that post-COVID, as we construction. Say again.
Your sound is going in and out.
Okay, there we go. I recognize most of you are still working. So was there a question?
No, we just had problems with your sound.
My sound.
Yeah, you were just.
Is it? Do you think it's an internet connection issue, or?
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it may be. You can keep trying, but go ahead. I'll let you know if there's any further problems.
Let me just make sure that my internet is going good here.
It's fine now. It just was a few minutes ago. It was an internet or video problem. Go ahead.
All right, cool. So recognize that in.
Actually, Wally, it seems to be when you back away and you're farther away.
I've heard there's still assumptions make about where people are just sitting on the sidelines waiting for work. I know the contractors are still working in a lot of situations, but we recognize certainly going forward that it's going to be a buyer's market. And what I mean by that, it's an employer's market because there's probably going to be a little less demand as we go through it. So here's the punchline with that. Don't be a jerk about it. Certainly, and by the way, I think if you're on this call, that doesn't apply to you, which then creates an opportunity because there's jerks out there. We're seeing that with people getting laid off and furloughed in the most insensitive ways right now. But this is always a good leadership truism, but I think it's even more important now as we think about people and that great quote about people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. This is a time to be showing how much you care. And fascinating out there right now on job sites that are still working. There are ones that are going fine. That's that kind of one there with the kids raising their hands on the right side. And then there are ones that are not going well. You see the fire and flame in the distance. And it comes back to job site supervision. The jobs that are moving along well, the jobs that don't have disruptions, the jobs that don't have significant anxiety on the labor side are the ones where supervision is high quality. We intuitively already knew that, but we're seeing it in the context of coronavirus safety that kind of PPE, social distance, et cetera. So really interesting that it's another validation of quality supervision. So it's a good picture for New Orleans, right? It's the number one mission that we all have right now is survival, right? Make sure that the business is going to continue to operate for the long term. But and not even knowing what the long term looks like, but we start to talk about being recovery ready. You got to think about scenario planning, right? And you can Google scenario planning and find all this stuff right here. But is it gonna, what's the economy gonna look like? So I'll give it to you more simply than this. I think you need to be planning for 4 scenarios. Now, I know there's 3 right there. The one scenario is the best case scenario, like, oh my God, coronavirus never existed, and if it did, it helped the business. We're in a phenomenal place. Not quite sure that's going to be an option. Then there's like the worst case scenario. It's getting bad and getting worse, and really concerned about business survival and those kinds of things. And then there's the in-between place of, yeah, it's not this, but it's somewhere in between. And the thought process here is that you what if each one of these scenarios, and ideally you bring some of your key staff in for a cross-functional kind of thought process. Now, this is a nice slide right here. Truthfully, I think the next one is where we're going to be. Meaning, I think there's a roller coaster scenario, and that's the 4th scenario. It would be nice if we're up. It would be manageable if it were down. You could figure out if it were middle, but I think you also need to be mentally and emotionally and business prepared for we're on, we're off, we're on, we're off, we're going fast, we're going slow. And how will you work through that? How will you communicate with your employees? And that's the key thing through all of this is communication. That and it's interesting, one of the things that we've seen, 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, Zoom became, the new darling stock, and a lot of people were doing their virtual happy hours and virtual town halls and all of that. And it was new, and it was exciting, and it was relevant. And I've talked to a few clients over the last couple of, days, and it's like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. And I'm like, why not? Well, and what's happening is we've settled so much into some of this virtual thing that it's becoming stale. But you got to remember, the water cooler conversations are not happening. People are not congregating. They're not coming to the shop to hang out and talk and get the word and be in the loop and all of that. So the requirement to communicate more is still valid. It's more valid than it was 4 or 5 weeks ago. So just a few thoughts on the specifics of Corona and where we are from a business perspective. So as I get into the data here, I got a couple of quotes here that are about 6 months old, and you're almost, and they're about a labor shortage, right? And research that Autodesk did, and that the labor shortage significant and widespread. Okay. AGC, 79% of firms plan to expand. 81 said it's going to be hard to get labor. So yeah, we're going to be in a downturn, but that's not going to change demographics, right? People are going to continue to retire. People are going to continue to view this industry less than glamorously as they have in the past. FMI saying the biggest hurdle in the next 5 years is making sure to have the right people to fill the jobs. So as I read all of these over the past year, I kind of got frustrated. There's probably another word or two I could use, but this has got to make this one safe for work. And I'm putting in myself in your shoes, the shoes of the business leader out there in the real world right now, reading this stuff, telling me that there's going to be a labor shortage. There is a labor shortage. And I'm like, really? This is not news. But I really then thought, okay, well, what is it like out there? Why is there a labor shortage? Is it that bad? What's the culture of the industry? And that's what you see right there. It's the People in Construction report that we released last year. And it doesn't ask, are you having trouble finding people? It doesn't say, are you concerned about labor? It says, what's the culture like in your organization? Is your boss a jerk? Because that has a direct correlation with people wanting to stay or not. So I reached out. I said, let me see what we can come up with. I used my database, which after 18 years supporting the construction industry, not bad. I used LinkedIn, and then I used LinkedIn groups, and I posted it out there and said, hey, doing some industry-specific research, would love your response. Nearly 500 construction professionals replied into SurveyMonkey, and then we did some follow-up interviews, released the report last year, well received, and obviously NTCA, and I mean obviously because NTCA is one of the best associations out there, asked me to write an article for the tile letter. Got to talking to Bart, and it was like, hey, maybe we could do one of these for the tile world. Absolutely. Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, my brother and dad were tile guys up in Long Island in New York City. So it's always good to get back to the tile world. So so we did. We crafted this NTA specific version. We tightened it up a little bit, released it beginning of the year with the thought and the hope that we would, this big reveal at Coverings. And so now we have a moderate reveal at Coverings Connected. Some good news, some bad news, as you might expect with any survey, but just a couple of data points. Nearly 50 folks, not bad. Normally in a situation like this, pre-convention, we expect a big run up in the 2 to 5 week period. Well, obviously, people were not thinking about filling out surveys 3 weeks ago, right? They were still trying to figure out, where do I buy toilet paper and those life essentials. So a little frustrating that the data doesn't have as much as it might, but some good data in it that I think you're going to find some value. Where'd the people come from? This was really refreshing for me, that and a good balance from each place. There's a handful of responses from each of these places. It's not like one, like North Carolina and David Allen had 500 respondents, right? It was a good response from across the board there, I thought, which was I was really happy about. Like I said, almost 50 respondents, and making sure nobody's okay. About half of the respondents were execs, and the next part I love. About a quarter were installers, which, rank and file, labor kinds of folks. And this is the tile specific numbers. When I go back to the general construction numbers that we did last year, only about 10% of the folks were on the labor side, the craft side. So I love this because it gives us a better understanding, from the front line. Obviously, the data skews older, age 40 and over, 90% male, not a surprise there. Very consistent with the industry, very consistent what we saw with general construction. And by the way, when I use the term general construction, it's GC kind. So there's heavy highway in there as well, but certainly some of the GCs that you work for. And then this is not rocket, this is not a surprise to any of you that 70% of the respondents are at a firm with under 25 employees. So this was released under the auspices of Coverings and with NTCA. But if you're in a small construction firm, no matter what you do, stone fabrication, whatever, smaller groups, I think this data is going to be relevant to you. So I don't think it's tile specific so much as it's smaller commercial construction specific. And I say commercial, but obviously a lot of you guys do residential. But so that's a thought as we look through these numbers. The other thing you got to keep in mind, this is not about money. In the year before when this data was released, you can see people were throwing money at people, right? But they were still facing labor shortages. So now, post-COVID, people are adjusting. But here's a quote. This is what people care about. Check this out. Not too hard to share that information, right? And now what speaker can't show a picture of his family, but I need to show you this. Number 34 there is my son, now age 18, age 17 at the time. He's a high school senior. That was senior night this past fall. And I tell you this because this kid
Hey,
and his
Wally,
generation
Wally,
are going to
we're
be working
seeing,
for you real soon.
oh,
Question?
there we go. Oh, no, you were on we were a slide behind. Now we're up.
Okay. All right. Love the internet. And that's my daughter next to him. She's a junior at Appalachian State on the golf team. But last summer, my son, his name is William. We call him BJ. The football coach left in kind of in the spring. Here they are going into senior year. Oh my God, we need a coach. We need spring ball, summer balls. Anyway, a new coach comes in, actually from a rival high school, and he knew about our program, or BJ's program. But he pulled together 5 of the seniors. Now there are like 20 something seniors on this football team. BJ and another guy have been 4 years on varsity, and there were 3 other guys who we would kind of call the core of the team. BJ was one of the captains eventually. And the coach has a conversation with them about how do you do practice, and how do you do games, and how do you do things here? And then he said, well, here are some things I think about. Good conversation. A little bit into that, they said, okay, talk to me about your recruiting profiles. And the kids kind of look up like that dog with the high pitched noise, like, what are you talking about, coach? He goes, yeah, we had Boston College here yesterday. Don't we give them something to, your height, weight, speed? Nothing, because the previous coach had nothing like that. He goes, all right, we're going to get that fixed. 2 weeks later, they all had the recruiting profile, but BJ comes home and I asked him, hey, how'd the meeting go? Yeah, tells me about it. And I said, so you think it's going to be all right? And he says, you know something? It feels like he really cares about us. That's a major takeaway here. I don't want to say what's in it for me, but do your employees know how much you care? And you might tell me, yeah, they do, but how do you know? And the data, I think, will show some of that as well. So, this kid's going to be working for you, and his generation's going to be working for you real soon, or not. Does he want to work for you? All right, let's dive in a little bit more. Let's get into some specific data here. There's good news and bad news, like I said. So from the research here, in that right side there, you see 83%. Now, anytime you see a number in parentheses, that compares your, what I'll call tile-specific data, to this general construction number, which had general contractors, heavy highways, concrete, et cetera, kind of, higher tier contractors, I guess. So we'll begin to see some stark differences as we go through it. 83% of your group said leaders live by the values. 85% said they trust their boss. Those are really good numbers. How good? Well, and how valid is that? Well, if you look at the trust index, which is done by a guy by the name of Dr. David Horsager, who I know fairly well from my trade association, his entire business is about trust. The trust index, 83% would not follow a leader they don't trust. So we come back over to yours and we say 85% trust their boss. We go, okay, we're on track there. We're on correlation. And it's easy to sit here and go, wow, 85%, 83%, those are pretty good numbers for our industry. Yeah, but let's go over to Moss and Seven, where you see that 98% of folks said that Moss is a great place to work. And 97% said that at Seven Solutions, management is honest and ethical. And this is to calibrate for you what a great place to work looks like. Every year, Fortune magazine does the top 100 companies to work for in America. They do big ones, middle, medium-sized ones as well. And every year there's a handful of contractors on there. So this is not, a great place to work is not about foosball and jelly beans in the break room. 3 things create a great place to work: trust, pride, and camaraderie. Trust in my immediate supervisor, pride in my organization, and camaraderie with those whom I work. And to be a great place to work, you have to be scoring in the mid to high 90s of people responding yes to those questions. So 83 to 85 is pretty damn good, but is it good enough to be, quote, best in class? The answer is not really. Is it good? Yeah, it's good, but not best in class. And to really calibrate for you, I think that's one of the things we want to keep in our mind. So industry-wide, the results are not bad, but are they good enough to sustain successful growth? So there becomes and remains a huge opportunity for firms and leaders willing to do the work. I say that the results are average. They're not best of class. Maybe they're better than average, but they're still not best of class. So as you'll see here along the way, for the most part, the tile world is looking a bit better than general contracting. Can you leverage this? Is there a story for you to tell to say, hey, working in this firm, you know, maybe it's a little smaller, maybe it's a little more of a family feel than other companies that may be family, but just may be significantly larger. And the core question in here, and it's one of the greatest cliches in American business, is, are people really our most important asset? And this really forces us to evaluate that a little. And then you guys know that I tend to be a smart ass, but this bottom bullet there about construction workers and suicide rates, and you're going to see some data here in a little while that just reinforces that there's an opportunity there to engage our field supervision a little bit better across the board. So, not my son's football team, but Gallup every year comes out with their engagement survey and says that there's about 30% engagement. Well, what that would mean is if you're running a football play, 3 or 4 guys are actually running the play, and 6 or 7 are not. And I don't buy it. I'm out there in the real world every single day, in your companies and in good contractors, and I don't see 70% of the people sitting on the bench kind of disengaged. I saw goodness. So I don't buy this number of 30% engagement, 70% disengagement. And as you're going to see, that's not the case from these responding firms. Did we get every tile contractor in the world? Did I get every general contractor in America on the initial survey? Absolutely not. And certainly people who are responding in the affirmative, have a good thing to say, but I think there's a lot of good news with this. So, here's the primary communication tool, and I'm just going to leave it up there and you can see it on the recording, but what kind of conversations are we having with a daily huddle every single day? This is the primary engagement tool we have at the field level. Asking, do we have everything? How can we get things done? And obviously, as we look through these questions, we're like, oh my God, I don't want to ask this new guy if he has any questions or ideas. I could be here for an hour. Yeah, I get that, but this is about engaging people. And when I ask these questions, they engage. So here's one of my favorite ways of explaining engagement. If this is a gear, and these are sprockets on the gear, how do I make that move? Well, I need another gear, right? This is me, and I'm engaging them, right? These questions are engaging questions. If I don't ask these questions, if I'm a jerk, if I just treat people, rough, they begin to disengage. Well, now how can I engage them? And the answer is I can't engage them. So, the daily huddle remains the primary engagement tool at the frontline level. And in smaller firms, I think, and in crews that work together on a regular basis, on maybe the same job for a couple of days, couple of weeks, etc., this kind of thing is the thing that begins to fall away. Okay, I get it. Does it need to be done every single day? Theoretically, yes, maybe not to this degree, but what are we doing to engage our folks on a regular basis? Or do we get complacent? And we get complacent, we think everything's fine, and all of a sudden people are walking off the job because they're not feeling trusted and valued. All right, really good news here. Of all respondents, happiness, right? Are you happy at work was the question, was a 7.0 out of 10. Hey, that's pretty darn good. Now, general construction was an 8, but hey, that's pretty darn good. Once again, it's not a 3 or a 4. Look at this one. 92% of your respondents had the materials to do the job. 94% on the general construction side. What does that say? It says we know how to plan to do work. We are good at what we do. I love this next one. Check out referrals. 84% of your group and of the bigger group would recommend to a friend. Wow, but do they? And when I get into these conversations and I'm in rooms with people as opposed to this more one-way conversation, I'll ask, does anybody have a referral program? And a lot of hands go up. And I said, well, tell me about it. And often it looks like this, which is why they don't refer. So, yeah, we got a referral program. Tell me about it. If somebody brings somebody in, we pay that referrer an insultingly low dollar amount, so low that it's almost not worth their time. And then we say, and if the person you refer to us stays for 90 days, we will give you part 2 of this insultingly low dollar amount. And a lot of people smile and go, yeah, that's what we got. Yeah, we got one of those. So what does that say? First of all, an insultingly low dollar amount, which says it's not worth my time. You'll pay me 200, 300, maybe 500 bucks to bring somebody in, but what will you pay a recruiter? And it's thousands of dollars. The other thing is, when you give me that part A, part B payment, what you're really saying is, I don't trust my own ability to interview. When you make it part A, part B, you put the burden on me as the referrer. Now, what's the objective of running an ad? The objective of running an ad is to get inventory of people to interview. What's the objective of a referral program? To get inventory of people to interview. Now, naturally, the people who refer vet that person a little bit. But when you put this 2-part thing on, and when you put the burden on me to find the right person, now you want me to find good people. You want me to be going to McDonald's in the morning and see that kid who's there every single day, working hard, serving me that coffee before I come to work. And it's like, okay, this kid looks like he's got it together. Hey, would you think about working in the tile industry? Would you think about doing something in construction? Right? It's not my brother-in-law who I trust who needs a job. Sure, that's a good referral, but broader, the objective is to get more people in the door. Definitely something to think about. And we did this research a couple of years ago. So yeah, a lot of people would refer it, which bottom line means I love what I do and I wouldn't mind bringing somebody in here, but we cast the net, we have them cast the net so small that it's just not worth it to me. So don't pay an insultingly low number and pay. Don't make it conditional because it says, I don't trust my ability to interview. Now this one, this is not so good news for you guys. My supervisor micromanages me. Now remember, on the left side is the tile world, on the right side is the general construction world. So you go, oh, okay. So 45% of all the respondents in your survey, and then 66% of the field respondents say that my supervisor micromanages me. And then you can see the executives, that 37% of the execs on your side and even 17% of the execs on the general side are saying that they get micromanaged. The numbers on the left are not good because micromanagement says I don't trust you. And as I think about this one, as I researched it, and as I did some focus group calls with guys in the industry over the last couple of weeks, I think this directly correlates to it being a small business. That, if I own the thing and I've got 25 people, I can be intimately hands-on and involved with, almost all my projects. Whereas if I own the business, but I'm running 500 people, as opposed to 25 people, it's a lot harder for me to micromanage. So, for those of you that are sitting on the call right now and watching this, this is one where I think you need to kind of think about it and look inside a little bit. We naturally get into the flip side of micromanagement, which is delegation. And the problem with delegation is we think on off, right? I give it to you, please don't screw it up. Well, here's a way of thinking about this. And again, I won't spend too long on here because you can download the video and focus on these exactly, and heck, email me and I'll send you this slide specifically. But rather than delegation on off, yes, no, you see levels of delegation here. When I say delegation, we think like level 6, 7, 8. You got it, please don't screw it up. But you can delegate getting information. You can delegate decision making, or maybe not decision making, but course of action development, but you make the decision, right? So the antidote for micromanagement is delegation. And if any of you have ever read The E-Myth, you know there's a little bit of that in there, but this is also one of the greatest books you can read on delegation. The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. It's been on the shelf for years. It's one of those, parables, and I think it was the second one that Ken Blanchard did. He did it with this guy, William Onken, who wrote a book called Managing Management Time. And it does a great job talking about delegation. And again, when I'm in a live scenario, I often have somebody who's read it and there's a handful in the room. They're like, oh my God, yes, it's changed my life. So it's a good one for you. It's on the shelves right now. You can order it and then pick it up curbside, or just have it delivered. It's worth the read. All right, let's keep moving on a little bit. Nice here, right? Or let's see. 17% of the field not set up for success every day. That's good news, right? So 17% of your field of all, and then 5% of your field not set up for every day. Flip it around, 83% of all, 95% of all say that of the field are saying we're set up for success every day. That's a great number. I mean, compare yourself to the general population there, right? That says you got half of the field there saying we're not set up for success every day. So once again, being set up for success every day is I have the right labor, materials, equipment to do what I need to do. I think there's a correlation there maybe to being a smaller business and there's maybe not more eyes, but there's less diffusion among too many wide projects that we can focus on what we're doing. But that's nice right there. So the feeling, and here's the thing, the feeling that you're set up for success is what this is all about, right? Somebody goes to work and they're like optimistic and they're energized because they have a higher likelihood that the day is gonna go well, as opposed to walking in and going, what's gonna screw up today? It just sucks the life out of people. So really nice job there. Once again, reinforcing kind of the construction 101 things about having the right materials and being set up for success, but that creates confidence in the organization and pride in the organization as well. Let's talk about change. If leadership is about change for better results, then we should talk about it because we're talking about people in leadership. The question was, attempts at change often fall short. Agree or disagree? Now, in your world, 25% of the execs agree, 17% of the field agree. As you can see here, really interesting, compared to the general construction world where 73% of the execs agreed that attempts at change often fall short. That one made me laugh and it made me cry, because what you got is you got 3/4 of the folks who are supposed to be leading the change saying that change efforts often fall short. So some good news here. Really happy about that on your side. Now, what's going on here, right? Because the majority of your folks are saying that change initiatives go okay. Right? 75% of the execs, 83% of the field are saying that change attempts don't fall short, right? Once again, I think it's a size issue. I think there's this, we can get our hands around an issue that we want to work on, and were able to wrestle it to the ground. That, or the folks that responded to this are in absolute denial, right? And the real question, or the real value for you here, is being able to take these questions back and get into a conversation with your folks and say, hey, how do we do with this? The punchline on change is that it takes longer than you think. It takes more personal selling than you think. And it can be frustrating because it takes longer and it takes more of your time. What generally happens is we're thinking about something, and we're thinking about something, like I'm thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it for a long time. And then I roll it out, and everybody goes, okay, I got it. And then you, as the leader who initiated the change, go, damn, I'm good. I'm going to move on to the next change. But your people are at the time of maximum anxiety because they have no clue what you're talking about. You just laid this change on them. So when you need to be leading them more effectively, personal selling, right? This is going to be okay. We're going to work through this. How can I help you, etc. You moved on to the next one, right? So that's why change attempts often fall short. Now, again, in your world, showing the data maybe a little bit better, but still, I think that's a question you want to think about. All right, play along. Fill in the blank. Anything worth doing is worth doing. Many of you said well. I know you did. But here's you go. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Meaning, if it's worth doing, it's okay to make mistakes along the way. You can see this change curve here, and notice at the bottom, we often abandon. Why? Because I'm doing something different, right? Whether it's a new software or a new mastic or a new compound, whatever, I don't know, but you're doing something different, a new procedure, doing something on the iPad. You're not going to be good at it initially. It's going to take time to get better at this new thing. And this is why people abandon it, right? Because they don't have success. The curve isn't like this. It's like what you see in front of you. So this, beyond the fact that the people who are leading the change often bail and move on to the next one, this psychology or emotion that folks are going through, you got to recognize there's just going to be this lower spot, and this is why change initiatives often fall short. Hang in there, right? Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, right? There's gonna be this time of degraded performance as you learn to use the new software, material, procedure, etc. But then it becomes familiar to you, and you become more effective, more efficient, etc., and you feel pretty good about it. So they call this the dip. Hang in there. You'll get through the dip. It's okay. Man, this one is fairly significant, and I think you can see it good enough. Yeah, this is, once again, on the left side, you see your numbers, and the parentheses numbers are the general construction world. There's a couple of questions on this one that are significant. I have a close friend at work. I like the people I work with, and then I'm able to maintain a reasonable work-life balance. Fascinating on the field supervision, it was 100% for you guys. I think we need more data there. But notice the general construction side there. What we're getting to here is is satisfaction, and do I like being at work? I have a close friend at work. One of the primary determinants of workplace happiness is, do I have a close friend at work? So, again, 50% of the general general construction soups, only 2/3 are yours, right? I trust what my boss tells me. Once again, there's some opportunity here. That once again, those two 100% at the bottom, I got to report the facts the way they came in. This is one I think where a little bit larger database might have shown some cracks in the armor a little bit. But broadly, once again, I think we see a more cohesive, positive workforce in this smaller world that most of you are in. than companies with 100, 200, 300 people. Kind of makes sense, but again, it becomes a point of leverage for you. This is an opportunity to sell, and to sell from a recruiting perspective, but then from a reinforcement perspective also, right? About, hey, this is good here. This is what's good about us here. As somebody's trying to poach your key people away, this is part of the story that you tell, if you can. I think as an industry, as a tile industry, you can tell that. And I'm not trying to suggest that the industry is a bunch of mom and pops working out of their basement. I mean, you got a very professional, trade, but generally the firms are smaller, and that creates an opportunity that we're seeing statistically from a culture perspective. And at the end of the day, this is what people are coming to work for these days, right? Is it a place that I want to be with? A place that I want to stay. There's a lot of data on this slide right here, and I don't want to spend any more time on it. Again, you can look at it, chew on it as it relates to your world. Heck, ask your own people these questions. You might be surprised. Set up an anonymous survey monkey and have them respond to it. Heck, we can set it up for you as a service to you, being part of the NTCA and the coverings group here. Happy to help you. So anyway, good stuff there. Something to think about. This is a fascinating question right here, and it's the question is, do you have more capacity? The question is, do you have more to give? And people are busy, right? And 1/3 of all respondents, your world and the general contracting world, quote, had more to give. So the question was, are you working at full capacity? And it was, I'm buried, I have more to give, and I'm just kind of on vacation the whole time. 1/3 have more to give. And you go, what's up with that? Well, it's a leadership issue. It's not a malingerer issue, right? And this thing it's called levels of work that we get into right here. And this is a piece of data from a place called PeopleFit in Raleigh, where they look at these they talk about right sizing the organization. But in theory, we have frontline employees who should be supervised by a foreman type of person, who would be supervised by a superintendent kind of person, who would be supervised by a project manager type of person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I recognize in your world some of those people may wear, two hats. But what happens is that we mismatch, right? That 52% of boss-employee relationships are mismatched. So you might have an installer, I'll call a level 1 employee, being supervised by a general superintendent, right? And maybe we missed a foreman, we missed a superintendent in there, right? That's a mismatch. Or you may have a general superintendent who is being supervised by a project manager, but the project manager has the exact same capacity as the general superintendent. In other words, he's not being led, right? There's not a leadership thing happening and a thought thing happening. They're on the exact same level. So what happens? This guy gets disengaged. This guy gets ticked off. This guy gets frustrated. Or what about the one where we talked about the installer not getting the level of supervision that he needs? Feels abandoned. It's like the kid in elementary school who acts out. Does he act out because he's a bad kid, or does he act out because he's bored? So when we see that 1/3 of all respondents had more to give, and rather than looking at them and saying, ooh, there's a problem with that person, the suggestion here is look at the levels of work. Is that person being supervised correctly, or are they not being supervised correctly? And theoretically, one level above as you work through that. Not on the same level, and not so many levels above that they can't reach that. And there's, again, a lot of data on here validated by PeopleFit, and that's all they do. But look at this, 52% of boss-employee relationships are mismatched. So when you start looking at performance issues and you look at right-sizing your organization and what has happened over the years and what might happen going forward as we get into a bigger downturn, rather not, is you got to think about these levels, because what happens is we start cutting the levels out, and then I don't have the proper supervision. And we wonder why this person down here isn't doing great, because they're not being supervised correctly. Something to think about there. All right, let's visit safety. A couple of things, what are best practices in safety these days? Obviously, JHAs, JSAs, kinds of things. You're probably required to do those on jobs with the GCs, the big GCs. Personal example still remains the best from a personal leadership perspective. When you're on those job sites, make sure you have your appropriate PPE on now, and Lord knows what that's going to require going forward from face shields and N95s and all that stuff. What are the values of your organization? One of the places where smaller organizations sometimes miss the boat here is that they haven't clearly articulated their values, but they're not on the website, or they are in a very poorly done manner. But that's the first point of entree for most people. This 17-year-old that's going to come work on your job site, or maybe come to work for your company, is that's where he's going to go. Whether he's a college graduate or not, he or she is going to go to the website. And so there's an opportunity here from a values perspective to articulate and reinforce, and really to solidify the culture of your organization. And then something I heard the other day was a hazard hunt. You know how it is. We go out to the job site, and all right, here we are on this job. We do the daily huddle, and it's just this droning thing, and it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher. The hazard hunt says, hey, in the next 10 minutes, go find something wrong on the job, and then come back and tell me something. And what it does is it engages people in a totally different way, changes the mentality. They're out looking for things, and it moves the scenario from they're on a receive mode to a how can I see things mode. And things that they had kind of tuned out of their mind in basic complacency. Oh yeah, that trip hazard that was there yesterday was there the day before. Then they don't see it anymore. All of a sudden they're seeing it again. A little bit of data on the safety side. Fascinating here. You see the disconnect here. 76% of your group, 7% of the general construction group said safety is a top priority. Well, you go general construction, that's great. I think the number down at the bottom is more relevant, where 84% of your group, of your field, said we consistently work safely, compared to 63% of the general contractor or the general construction group. That disconnect, that 97-63 disconnect, is probably one you see from time to time going out on the jobs. Let me fly over to your side a little bit. That 76 to 84 is an opportunity, I think. I think there's an opportunity to be more vocal about safety. The argument you may make is Wally, we don't work in a tile installation is not, fabrication, etc., is not a dangerous, it's not like I'm a lineman, or it's not like I'm tying off rebar. I'm not doing, pipelines. Yeah, I'll give you that. Doesn't mean we can't elevate safety as a priority, and then leverage that. And you certainly need to be having that conversation from a marketing perspective. But then the more important thing here is whether you are or you aren't elevating that your field is saying you consistently work safely. So some great news there as well. All right, how do we wrap this thing up? Make sure that's not okay. Yep, good. How do you take this home, right? Honesty, trust, and inclusion remain opportunities for you as we go into this time of uncertainty. Communication, honesty, trust, and inclusion. Safety leadership remains an opportunity for you, I think. Spent a lot of time talking about change management, and that we talked about doing that scenario planning. What we know is that tomorrow and next week, next month, et cetera, is going to be different than it was, which means there's going to be change, and you may need to be implementing change. So leadership is about change for better results. Change is going to be thrust upon you. How do you get through that? So there's definitely an opportunity for you from that perspective. I already spent some time talking about the referral programs. I think that's an opportunity for you too. All right, and then what's the punchline on the football story? This is after the conference championship game. That football team went on to win their conference. They were undefeated through conference, and they made it to the state championship, which that team had never done before. They lost, but hey, they made it to the state championship. And my point here is that when you create the right culture, and there were no 5-star athletes on this team. There are a bunch of good ball players. A couple of them will walk on to Division I. My son's going to go play at a place called North Central. They're the Division III national champions, so that could be fun. But when you get a bunch of good people together and you lead them effectively, you can create a great culture and amazing things can happen. So I remain convinced more now than ever that I think people are your best profit strategy, and maybe the real thing is the right people. And so there's some things to think about here. Send me or send the association some information. If you want some information, we're here for you, and we can take it from there. I'll wrap it up. We've got a couple of minutes left if there are any questions. I didn't see any come in along the way, but I'm going to turn it back over to the moderators. There's my contact information. I am stoked that you were on this call today. I'm grateful that you were committed enough to coverings. I'm sorry we're not in New Orleans. Where are we going to be next year for coverings? Is it going to be in a cool place?
We'll be back in Orlando for 2021.
Fair enough. Were there any questions?
No, well, you have stunned everybody with your brilliance. Everybody just has taken away and is absorbing everything that you've said. So we don't have any questions. But as you can see, Wally's contact information is up there. Please reach out to him if you have any additional questions, or once you've absorbed everything and thought about it and reached out to him later. So thank you for a wonderful presentation, Wally. Thank you to everyone who's attended Coverings Connected. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. It's short, we promise. We would appreciate it if you would complete it and provide your feedback. As just mentioned, Coverings 2021 will take place April 13th through 16th in sunny Orlando, Florida. And so we'll have more information on that in the covering months. On behalf of Coverings Connected and our wonderful presenter, thank you so much for joining us today. Please stay safe and healthy. And thanks again, Wally.
Thank you.